Today's meeting started with a discussion on macroeconomic developments. This discussion took place at a time of significant turbulence. The situation in the Middle East is deeply concerning. Besides the economic turmoil, we're witnessing a situation with broad geopolitical repercussions. In this time of crisis, the EU stands in solidarity with its friends in the region and with the people affected. 2025 was a positive year for the European economy, with higher than expected growth, supported by stabilizing inflation, stronger domestic demand, robust labor markets, and favorable financing conditions. Today, however, we find ourselves in a quite different environment. We're closely monitoring market reactions to the developments in the Middle East. This is what dominates international headlines. The European economy has the capacity and the resilience to absorb temporary shocks, but at the same time, we must be prepared for a more prolonged period of instability with potential disruptions in shipping, increases in energy prices, and implications for inflation. Energy is at the center of our attention. Instability in the Middle East and the ongoing war in Ukraine remind us of how vulnerable energy markets are and how exposed our economies might remain to external shocks.
Developments in the Middle East had already had a material impact on energy prices, posing risks for a broader EU economy. This impact on the European economy will depend on the duration, scope, and intensity of the conflict. Should the conflict quickly de-escalate, contained disruptions to energy supplies and infrastructure would likely have a limited impact. However, a persistent targeting of shipping and energy infrastructure risks exposing the global economy to a stagflationary shock over the longer term. This is to say a situation where higher energy costs combine with weaker confidence, supply chain disruptions, and tighter financial conditions. At this stage, we cannot predict in which scenario we will find ourselves in. It is therefore too early to speculate about specific policy implications. We need to keep a cool head, so to say, and continue monitor the situation. In this context, today the G7 finance ministers held a virtual meeting. While no efforts should be spared to ensure security of energy supply and opening up the Hormuz Strait, we should keep the pressure on Russia to prevent it from filling its war chest. Not doing so would undermine Ukraine. It would undermine the EU's support to Ukraine, and ultimately it would also undermine our allies, as we know that Russia is playing in the same team as Iran. So it is commendable that there was a firm commitment from G7 ministers to coordinate positions. And we stand ready to take necessary measures such as stockpile release. G7 energy ministers will take this discussion forward already tomorrow. But one thing is already clear. New challenges around the world underline the urgency of acting decisively here at home. This is the only way to prepare ourselves for new geopolitical realities and safeguard our long-term security and prosperity.
I would like to start by sharing with you, as I did in the Eurogroup, how the recent developments in the Middle East have affected the market views in Europe. Before the geopolitical turmoil, investors were positive about the EU growth outlook. This was reflected in market sentiment and investors' appetite for European assets, European stocks, and European bonds. The conflict in the Middle East has provisionally, and I underline provisionally, dampened this positive trend. This is primarily driven by the fact that Europe is highly dependent on energy prices, and the conflict obviously exacerbates that. European stocks fell since the beginning of the conflict by roughly 9%. Oil prices rose by around 40% since the start of the military engagement. a pace that is faster than on the onset of the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
As regards the policy response to economic consequences of a current conflict of Middle East, as I was mentioning, the economic consequences will be to large extent dependent on duration and width of the conflict. So if it's if we manage to have a quick de-escalation of conflict, also the economic implications and implications on the energy markets may be limited. However, should the situation drag on, both in disruptions in Hormuz Strait and in the targeting energy infrastructure in the Gulf region, that of course can have more far-reaching and longer-term implications, and our policy response must depend on which scenario eventually we find ourselves in, and that's not something which we know at current stage.
Jelajahi cara baru mendapatkan informasi. Download MetroTV Extend sekarang.